I mean, so that, the OODA loop and John Boyd's ideas have been around for, decades now, but I imagine that there has been shifts in both military thinking and in management thinking. What kind of shifts have you seen there,
Um, hmm.
or lack thereof?
Well, yeah, I mean, so there's both going on concurrently, I guess. So, when I joined the military, in mere sort of 20 years ago, I was still carrying an analog radio, believe it or not.
Yeah.
My training was still fundamentally about fighting the Cold War. So it was all about, NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare defense. It was about digging trenches. It was about, large scale land warfare in Europe, essentially, even though I was, part of the commandos. But, if you look at the commandos were born in the Second World War as part of the Special Operations Executive to wage asymmetrical warfare. So it's somewhat ironic that the wars that have bogged the West down in the last 20 years have been asymmetrical warfare, where we
Yeah.
were on the receiving end. So, there's definitely been a huge shift in how those wars are prosecuted and fought. Team of Teams is a fantastic book that I always recommend, which tells the story of how a whole organization had to be reorientated to combat an enemy that was completely different to what they expected. And I mean, in business terms, I mean, you can't even recognize it nowadays. Like to my point earlier, when I first moved into professional programming in, the late, like 2008 was when I became my first professional programmer. You were still in the days of, renting or buying a server, finding space in a data center, setting up routers, all this kind of stuff that you had to do before you could even think about starting to write code, and and deployment and all that stuff. And now we're at the point where you don't even have to write code for a whole bunch of stuff in your business. Like the automation platforms that I've been using over the last couple of weeks, absolutely mind-blowing what you can put together with those and not even have to have an expensive programmer writing code. So this kind of accelerating frontier of change means that, niches are now more addressable. Companies that built something 10 years ago are now much more quickly vulnerable to newcomers who want to take a chunk out of their business. Legacy becomes legacy much more quickly. And in the midst of this, we've still got several industries that haven't adopted that pace of change at all. So I can't see anything other than absolute carnage in the next few years or decades.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've technology changes so fast, and yet our sort of management solutions, like you said, a lot of them are just derived from working on a factory line. And even things that they claim to go through the OODA loop faster, like agile. A lot of the agile techniques and the things that are still around are they're a decade old, and in technology terms, that's ancient history, right?
Yep.
So it's crazy that we're still using these off the shelf cookie cutter techniques, sort of
Yeah.
blindly cargo culting them and hoping that they'll work as the company grows. It's sort of crazy that there aren't more people like you talking about these first principles ideas and learning how to apply them to business.
Yeah, I think there's something underlying that I just want to pick up on. The reason I think that we're sort of semi stuck in the old ways is because with the increasing pace of change, people get busier. People naturally feel like their hair's on fire in most
Mhm.
startups. So the only thing that really gets people's attention is something that's simple, right? Something that's simple to explain. The problem is that the inherent causes of the problems that we face are complexity. They are, an increasingly networked and connected world. And that really defies simple solutions. That means that you have to shift your focus from thinking about individuals and things, and you have to really expand your awareness to consider like second, third order effects. You have to consider the connections between things, and like that's a very different mental place to be than focusing 100% on delivering the thing that your software is, your software startup or your just general startup is there to do. So there's this tension of having to have focus on delivering what you're delivering, but then there's all this incidental complexity which is just getting worse and worse and becoming more and more of a problem
Mhm.
more and more quickly. And I think the companies that I think are successful that I look up to in this space, people like Ryan Peterson at Flexport, the Ubers and Airbnbs of the world, the ones that are making platform plays now, they recognize that they're in this complexity and somehow they're managing to apply, simple principles to allow emergent behavior, and that requires a very, very different mindset.